Delighted to be with you, kids. It's Tuesday, first Tuesday of September, in fact. The first viewer says, I'm very new to this. I've read Real Love and Marriage and have already felt great results. Now I'm reading it again because I'm struggling. I feel disappointed and angry, so I know that I'm using getting or protecting behaviors with my husband, but I am so into my emotion about it all that I'm not even sure which ones I'm using and why I can't seem to get out of them. I'm pretty sure I'm doing the victim, anger, and control stuff. If you look at the whole pile of Real Love books and DVDs and all that, it can look like there's a lot of information, and potentially there is. But it's pretty simple, and we do better the simpler we keep it. So with your husband, for example, like you said, you're into all these getting and protecting behaviors with him. Remember that it's still always about love. So do you want to feel loved? Do you want to be loving? Because those two conditions and behaviors will lead to happiness. So then you make a decision to simply note, just note. You don't have to change everything all at once. Just note whether each thought and behavior and decision on your part will contribute to feeling loved, being loving. Just note it. You don't have to stop everything. But if you tell the truth about it, I'm not being loving. This particular behavior will not contribute to my being loved, loving, and happy. As you notice the difference between the ideal and what you're doing, without making a big fuss about it, without feeling guilty, bit by bit, you'll narrow the gap between what is and what you'd like it to be. It will happen because we have a natural desire to do what's right. We have a natural desire to achieve a state of being loving and happy. So just notice it. And it'll take time to change the inertia of a lifetime to this point. Now, you may achieve instant changes in perspective, but actually changing how you feel and how you behave might take a little longer. Now, how long? Well, it depends on how utterly you throw yourself into being honest about your feelings and behaviors and decisions. But the more that people have faith in telling the truth and in feeling loved, wow, you can experience pretty dramatic changes fairly quickly over periods of days, even weeks. The more we piddle around in the middle, well, I'm not sure I can do that. The more we do guilt and blaming and then back away from being honest and about our behaviors, the longer it takes. And different people take different periods of time. Some people have been wounded more. Some people have an ability to grasp these principles slower. That's okay. We all move at what we can do. And I would further recommend that you not try to do it alone. Many people do. Try to just read the book and then go, well, I'm going to change my life, or I have to change my life, even worse, more guilt. Discuss what you're learning with people. And as you get on the conference calls, as you practice talking to friends, as you talk to people one-on-one in the Real Love community, you'll discover that you get better at being truthful. You get better at narrowing the gap between the ideal and what really is. You continue. A few months ago, during a rockier than normal time in our marriage, my husband said he wanted to try sleeping with other women. Not to have a relationship, but just for the sexual experience. Well, that's pretty honest of him. And it's hysterical how many different ways men manage to justify their addiction to sex. They say, well, it was just sex. It didn't mean anything. It's not really infidelity if all I had was sex. I've heard that one several times. And it's all a lie to justify filling up with imitation love in the absence of real love. So even though it's a lie and it's ridiculous, it doesn't seem ridiculous to somebody who doesn't know what real love is and is simply trying to achieve some measure of satisfaction, some measure of temporary pleasure. So be understanding of him as he says this, and understand where he's coming from rather than being offended, which isn't going to help anybody. This isn't about you. It's about him and his emptiness. It's also pretty likely that if he's considering this, that he's probably using porn. I mean, not 100%, but since the incidence of porn is just phenomenally high anyway, if somebody brings up having outside sexual experiences, well, then it becomes even more likely. And I'm not suggesting you spy on him, but it is important that we address the forms of imitation love that we're using. So if that means that you need to check your internet history on your computer, all the computers in the house, that's not an unreasonable thing to do, just to get out in the open whatever it is that he's doing. If you go there and you discover in the internet history, which is easy to check, that he's using porn, then that needs to be talked about. If you discover that there's no internet history at all, that means it's been erased and he has been using porn. That's a guarantee. It's kind of funny when men erase their internet histories for the purpose of protecting themselves and hiding, when really that's like, making a sign on their foreheads that says I am. You continue. I was upset and said that wouldn't work for me. If he chose that route, he'd be choosing to not be in the relationship. So the book, meaning the Real Love book, says no limits or boundaries. Well, no, not boundaries preemptively, because boundaries establish an attitude of protecting yourself. But just because you don't set up boundaries doesn't mean that you have to participate in sick decisions or decisions that you don't want to participate in. So there's a difference between setting a boundary, and which is more of a protective thing. It's an attitude, and telling him, I just wouldn't be willing to continue on a relationship where you knowingly and repeatedly go out and engage in extramarital affairs. I can't get my head around this situation at all, you continue. It's a pretty tough request to fill, I think, without feeling unloved. You think? It's a very common thing that men say that sex is first natural, which is true, and then second, that it's an irresistible drive, that it just must be filled. Well, obviously not. There are men who have lived without sex for their entire lives and somehow managed not to die. So obviously it's not irresistible, because some men do, and does not interfere with your physical health. So these are excuses that men use to justify the way that they deal with their emptiness. Now, does that mean that that many men don't experience a really strong sexual compulsion or urge or interest? No, of course. But there have been occasions when virtually all of us have thought, I wanted to kill that person, and we don't then kill them. So having urges, natural. What we do with them is what separates us from animals. So just look at the truth, rather than be offended about it. When he says, I want to go out and gratify my urge for imitation love, even if it's hurtful to you, that's not caring. It's not selfless. So it would be natural that you would not feel loved by him, because in that moment he's really not. But again, don't go to the offended thing. Remember that he's doing the best he knows with what he has. If he doesn't know real love and he's feeling empty, then he's going to reach out for some powerful source of imitation love. And goodness, sex is about as powerful as it gets in the short term. Supplying praise, power, pleasure, just does the whole deal. And then second, remember that you can still find love from many other sources, including receiving what bits of unconditional concern he from time to time expresses to you. Just because somebody's engaged in the practice of imitation love doesn't mean that they're a 0% giver of real love. There may be moments when he actually does show some concern for your interest. And you can benefit from those if you choose to be grateful for them, see them and be grateful for them, and not just focus on this little fit that he might be having about imitation love. You say, my husband is a good person and has always been honest with me, so on the one hand, I'm thankful that he's being truthful. Indeed. After I've said no, he has not put any more pressure on me. Well, cool. That's a neat thing to know. For the most part, you continue, I'm happy with myself and our relationship, but every once in a while I get these horrible thoughts or anxiety that maybe he's not being truthful and that I can't keep him contained forever, so he may leave. Or how can anybody love you but think about sleeping with other people? This isn't just about sex. If he's bringing up having sex with other women, contrary to what you imply here, your relationship couldn't be otherwise healthy. So there's no way two people are having an otherwise healthy relationship. Like you say, I'm happy with myself in our relationship. Well, happy may mean the absence of severe crises. It may mean coping. It may mean you're surviving. But to be genuinely thrilled with it, there's no way that your relationship is really healthy, and then, just as kind of a side note, he's thinking about having sex with other women and is actually bringing up the real possibility of that. Impossible. There are some other things not happening well in your relationship, and those need to be addressed. You continue. The book seems quite conservative, the Real Love book, on the topic of sharing your sexual attention. Even looking at other women or porn is considered out of bounds. I do understand that my husband is sharing his sexual attention beyond me, but I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing to glance at other women or read sexual books and so on as entertainment, as long as it is not an obsession. I don't really do these things, but I don't judge my husband for them because he's still respectful to me for the most part. I must sound very mixed up. Well, there's considerable confusion because men make such a big deal out of how sex is such a natural impulse. Well, it is. But like I said, many things are natural. I mean, snake venom is natural, but we don't indulge in, we don't allow it to enter our bodies. So, sex is natural, but when men, and having an occasional sexual thought, you can't stop those. You're going to have those. But we're responsible for how we respond to them. And responding to them by engaging in the use of pornography, sexual materials that you refer to. If that continues, it will harm the relationship because he is being sexually emotionally unfaithful to you. And that does escalate. Why do I emphasize the potential dangers? Because if I'm engaging in looking at or reading sexual materials and my wife's not involved, I'm serving myself. And selfishness always has a pernicious, cancerous effect on any relationship. And in the long run, you'll discover that it will be deleterious. It will be harmful. So it doesn't make him bad. It doesn't make any man bad. But it does have a negative effect, and we can minimize it, but we're kidding ourselves. So what's the solution? What can you do here? What can you do that's positive instead of focusing on these potentially negative effects? Ask your husband what he feels like is missing. Ask him if there's anything that's going on, anything that you're doing that's contributing to his emptiness. And you may learn some things about your relationship that you didn't know. Do more building in your relationship, where the two of you read the marriage book, for example, together, along with the 40-day workbook, and actually work at building your relationship instead of just avoiding infidelity. Avoiding infidelity, that's just like white knuckling it. It's a lifetime attempt to, keep the cows in the barn, so to speak. Well, you don't want to just be preventing terrible things. You want to be creating a healthy thing, because when your relationship is healthy enough, the thought of having sex with another woman or even looking at one would be repulsive to him. Really. In real love relationships, men don't look at other women. Why? Just because they grit their teeth and go, no, it's wrong, or it will offend my wife? No, because it wouldn't even occur to them. They're so happy and loving and selfless in their relationship that going somewhere else just wouldn't even make sense. Here's a viewer who says, I've noticed that the attacks and criticisms of strangers hurt more than the attacks of those close to me. Rarely do I feel hurt by a family member's outburst of anger because I know their patterns well. And it's obvious their reaction is in no way about me, even when they try hard to tell me that it is. But often I feel hurt by a stranger's outburst of anger because I don't know their patterns and I make it all about me. It's backwards. A negative interaction with a condescending clerk at the grocery store stings more than an outright argument with family. I remind myself that these strangers are empty and afraid and are likely trying to get power in any way they can, and that maybe they reacted to me with anger because I didn't feed into whatever power they were seeking, but I still internalize it and feel like it reflects on some inherent character flaw of mine. So what do I do about this? You're right, that is backward from usual, because usually we're hurt most by the people who are closest, the people with whom we have the greatest expectations that they will love us. But in your case, it's very likely that a factor really important to you is safety. You like to control things so that you can feel safe. And you've learned how to understand, and you said it yourself, these people are more familiar to me, the people that are close to you. You learn to understand them and relatively control the people who are close to you. So, like you said, you know their patterns. So they're more predictable. In other words, they're safer. Whereas strangers are not predictable. Strangers just come out of the blue, and I mean, with family members you can have an argument, but you know that there are things you can do afterward to pretty much calm things down and make everything better, and so you don't really worry. Whereas with strangers, you don't know what they're going to do, and it hurts you to hear their negative comments because you don't know how to stop them, control them, make them go away, appease them, please them. So what can you do? Enhance your perspective, perhaps, would be one thing. Suppose you do a stupid thing, for example, and a stranger is angry. I would suggest to you that you ask a question. Could you find anybody else on the planet who, if you did that stupid thing, would not be angry? If so, and you always can, if so, then the stupid thing that you did and the reaction of the angry person, it's obviously about them. If you can find one person who would not be, then the person who is angry is really telling you about himself or herself. If we really got that, we'd never be hurt by anything anybody else did. Anytime somebody behaves toward us in a negative way, they're telling us about themselves, even if what we did was awful or stupid or a mistake or inconvenient. It doesn't matter. It's always a description of them. And then obviously the other thing, the one is a change in perspective, and the other thing is to just simply feel more loved by people who really do care about you and to remember that they love you. We don't always have to be going to other people and say, well, reaffirm that I'm worthwhile. That doesn't work because now really we're squeezing it from them. But to remember the many occasions when people who have not needed something from us and who have been loving have really cared about us, which is now telling us something about us, that we are worth loving. We all are. If you can do both of those, the change in perspective and get filled up enough, strangers will bother you less and less. It won't go away maybe all at once. This is a process that we have to practice in some cases for a lifetime. This viewer says, since studying real love, things are improving quite nicely between my husband and I. We're having conversations where I stay open and he doesn't get angry. We're seeing amazing transformations in each other, which is very cool. Nice to hear. One thing that we need help with is our kids. My husband has 5, I have 3. his kids are a bit violent and are always yelling and hitting. Not to say that mine never do. Giving the kids consequences such as time out in the room is not really helping us move from this behavior. So, what do you suggest? We have not started reading the Real Love and Parenting book yet. We're working on the marriage book, as you suggested. So, remember, you've just been introduced to real love. You have a lot of areas where you need to grow. You've already said that things are improving nicely between my husband and I. Well, gee, how wonderful. So already in a short period of time, you're seeing an effect. If it takes a little longer to see this effect with your children, well, understandable. So I would recommend that you continue doing the work that you're doing with the marriage book since it's working, and then bit by bit draw in the parenting book. And I would suggest that the two of you spend a little bit of time reading it by yourselves and then actually read it all together with the family. The kids will understand these principles. And as you read together, the kids will see that these are principles that are going to guide the entire family. Whereas in most families, the children's behaviors are controlled by really the whim of the parents. The parents say, well, just do that because I said so. Kids feel so much safer and cared about when they see parents say to them, we're all going to live by these loving principles, the principles that we're reading about in Real Love and Parenting. Wow, kids feel now like included. They don't feel like, second-class citizens. They don't feel put down, criticized, controlled. So I would suggest that you begin reading the book with your children, and I suggest you do it every day. If you do it for 10 or 15 minutes, these are the principles that lead to happiness in life. Kids spend, 7-8 hours a day in school learning about principles, most of which, frankly, having been highly educated myself, they're never going to use. I can't do trigonometry now. I don't remember, the dates of all the historical events that I was taught when I was a kid. The things that really matter are teaching them how to be happy. So 15 minutes of life lessons, way worth it. It will pay you richly. Now the short answer, though, is love them. They have to be loved more. Then taught, then consequences are last. But we're not going to make a big difference in a two-minute answer here. So I suggest you read the book. This viewer says, how do I get over a relationship? When a relationship... Pretty common situation that relationships end. And when they do, there are only so many reasons that a relationship doesn't work out. So just looking at those reasons, we can learn a lot about how to get over it. So what does it take to make a relationship succeed, be happy? It's not the things that we have in common, as would be suggested by the internet questionnaires. It's always about real love. So if a relationship did not work, there are really just two broad reasons why. The first is that you, I, whoever, didn't have enough love to make it work. I was not loving enough. I was empty and afraid, so I attacked my partner. I lied. I acted like a victim. I clung. Whatever. I used imitation love in its various forms. Answer that question for yourself. In the particular relationship that you had that failed, what was your part in being unloving? Learn from that. That's huge. What we learn from an event that's over is what matters, as opposed to pining, whining, grieving forever over what couldn't possibly have worked. Learn from it and move on and apply it in the next relationship, which I would also encourage you that you not begin too soon. The second reason that a relationship wouldn't work would be my partner didn't have what it took. Now, if I were perfectly loving, I might be able to have a relationship with almost anybody, no matter how unloving they were, almost. But we're not perfectly loving. And so at our present condition of or ability to learn, we're going to discover that some people are just overwhelming. And it may be that our partners were so unloving that we just could not have made that relationship work. So that's another possibility. And again, this isn't for accusation or for guilt, it's for learning from that. Because if my partner was that unloving, I promise you, there was something about me that attracted that person into my life. So I need to learn from that. And then we're back to number one, which was all the unloving things that I did, or unloving forms of imitation love that I indulged in. So we need to learn from that in choosing a better partner and in becoming somebody who won't attract that kind of partner again. When you really get that there's really only a couple of reasons and that we learn from them rather than pine over what couldn't have happened, considering that my partner wasn't loving enough and I wasn't loving enough. Well, it was impossible with what we had then. So now let's learn and move on and do it better the next time. This viewer says, recently I reconnected with an old friend after not seeing him for 10 years. I learned that he was an alcoholic, and shortly after our reconnecting, he went to rehab for alcohol, drug abuse, mental health issues, even suicidal thoughts. I came from a family where an uncle died of cirrhosis, an aunt died from alcohol, and there have been mental health issues on both sides. So I immediately tried to support my friend who said that he felt trapped and was tired of living this way. Well, as I started talking, interestingly, he got very angry with me and said I was not respecting him, that I was telling him what to do, which is probably true. Then you continue. I know deeply that he was right, so you noticed it too. How do we love others unconditionally when they're bent on destroying themselves and their relationships? I mean, I don't support these behaviors, and I've been sad to hear some of his choices and thinking. I haven't seen him for weeks now, and I don't know the best way to support this kind of person. I also find it difficult to not want anything for myself in relationships, which makes things worse. Well, honey, you've already nailed it, the answer. You want something for yourself in relationships, which is, let's see, very natural. But the other person feels that. If I want something from you, you can sense it. You can smell it. It has its own stink. Now, we justify it, and I'm sure you did, by saying, well, but I really want to help. Oh, man, that just sounds so good, doesn't it? But even that comes across as a need, because, of course, we want to help in a certain way. And we want our help to show some results. Well, see, that puts the other person on our timetable and our schedule, and, people hate that. So, what do? We accept people. We accept people as they are, which is not the same as condoning their behavior. If you completely accept him while he's an alcoholic and using drugs and having suicidal thoughts, he'll feel your acceptance. And there's no way, nobody's this stupid. How many thousand alcoholics, addicts, and depressed people have I known? And when you love them, there's not one of them who takes your love and acceptance as an approval of their drinking. Really. There isn't one alcoholic who goes, oh, well, let's see, if she loves me, then drinking alcohol must be okay. Nobody's that stupid. And yet, we feel this urgency to communicate to them in so many ways, with our facial expression, our tone, the advice that we offer. We feel this urgency to communicate to them that what they're doing is harmful. Good grief, they know that. So what they need from us is our love. So what do you say? Now, I can give you a few words, but it's not the words, it's the attitude. It's really listening to them. It's saying things like, well, that must feel incredibly painful for you. That's a moment of understanding. It involves saying to them, what do you want? I mean, just the other day, like recently, a friend came to me and and talked about his suicidal thoughts, his drinking. It just went on and on, very much like your friend. And I said that to him. Wow, this is a really painful time for you. He just wept. He just sat there and cried. And guys don't do this very easily. And so, I asked him, what do you want? Well, he just poured his heart out, how he wanted his life to look. And so I said, so now I've got a picture of where you are and where you'd like to be. What do you plan to do to go from where you are to how you'd like your life to be? And, he said he didn't have the first clue. So I said, would you like me, because it's up to you, I have no need to do this, would you like me to suggest some possible ways how you could get from where you are to where you'd like to be? I didn't say to him, you ought to anything. You ought to quit that. No. Do you have any ways? He didn't. So I proposed, would you like to hear some? He said, boy, I really would. So I said, well, you could do this differently. I've seen that work very effectively. You could do a little of that, a little of this. It was like giving them a menu. You could pick from any one of a number of things. There were some things that he thought, I couldn't do that. Okay. But he said, I could do this, and I could do that. And mostly, I listened. There really wasn't much that I said to him to do. And he called me, I guess the next day. And he said, I was talking about killing myself. I said, yeah. And as opposed to, oh, no, don't do that. I said, yeah, I remember. And he said, everything feels different. I don't feel panicky. I don't feel hopeless. I see some things now that I could do differently. And he told me some of the things that he was going to do. Now, some of them are pretty good ideas. Some of them, I don't see how in the world some of them are going to work. Not my decisions to make. I just said, well, how wonderful that you feel better and see more clearly. He was thrilled and hung up the phone. And I've talked to him now, several times since then. And he's actually doing those things. Taking concrete steps to change his life in many ways where when we first talked, he said there was no hope for change. So it's about loving people and only a little bit teaching them if they want to be taught, rather than telling them what they ought to do. This, by the way, also addresses the question that was asked earlier about how you help children. Children respond to the same approach. Here's a viewer who says, I was introduced to you and your teachings through a Hay House radio program recently, and you touched a chord within me. I'm concerned about my very eccentric aunt. She never married. She lives alone in a home which she has filled floor to ceiling with newspapers and any other thing that catches her interest at the time. Pretty bizarre behavior, and I've seen a number of people who do this. In fact, there are now television shows, apparently, reality shows, all about people who fill their houses with junk. We need to understand them. When people get to a place where they're sufficiently empty and afraid, they will do anything that temporarily fills them up. And I mean just anything. Kill each other, shoot up drugs, have affairs, name a thing. And one of the things that people do is to accumulate things. These things give them whole bunches of sensations. They give them a feeling of connection to the world. It gives them a feeling of power because they now own this thing, you see. And most of all, they can control it. They own it. They can place it in a certain place and move it and do with it whatever they want to. They get a sense of power from buying these things, from gathering them together. It just really gives them a sense of fulfillment. It's not a little thing. And they become terrified to ever let go of any of these things which have given them that feeling. If they were to lose one of those things, well, that would just be horrifying. What if that was the thing that they need? And so they become very attached to this stuff. Weird to other people, not weird to them. And just understanding them is huge. Whereas when we look down on them and say, well, now you ought to this or you need to that, well, maybe they do. But we need to talk to them before we go to make any changes. I remember once I was involved with a church group that decided that they were going to clean up this house of this lady whose entire house, this was a 2-story large house that was filled from ceiling to floor, every room, with garbage. Rotted peelings, open cans. I mean, the house was filled with, flies and maggots, and not so much rats, because it was also filled with cats and their feces. Horrifying place. And so the church decided to get together, and they were going to go in and clean it all out. They asked me what I thought. I said, insane. They said, well, but it's unsanitary. And you'll clean it out, and she'll have it all right back the way it is now within a year. Well, I was wrong. They cleaned the whole house out. She had it back to its former state within 6 months. She just went and gathered more stuff. There's always more stuff. She needed it. And we need to understand that before we go and try to correct these people. You continue. Her new passion is, and has been for the past 2 years, exercise and exercise equipment. She joins clubs. She walks. Her walking goal this year is 750 miles. Last year she got an award for meeting her 500-mile goal. Very commendable. Well, I mean, goodness. Another thing that we can control in our lives is how we exercise and what we eat. So anorexics, in great measure, it's about control. They can control what goes into their bodies, just like hoarders control what goes into their house. Exercise equipment, and notice she's even getting some praise for being an exerciser. So another addiction, which doesn't mean all exercise is addictive, but in this case she's using it that way. The problem lies, you continue, in the fact that she doesn't bathe, and it appears she no longer washes her clothing. So remember, this woman is empty. She doesn't feel loved, and taking care of her physical appearance and her hygiene has never gotten her anything. It hasn't made her happy. It didn't make her happy in the past. She doesn't get real love for being clean and tidy, and she's never really even gotten any imitation love. She's empty, alone, has no friends. So all those years that, because you can bet that for a while she did keep up her appearance and her hygiene, and what did it get her? Nothing. No happiness. So eventually, when a thing doesn't work for us long enough, many of us just give it up. So now she's going, what do I care? So now she's just let it go completely. Becomes completely understandable. You continue. She's a very loving woman. That would be very unlikely. She might be pleasant on occasion to people when they're doing what she likes, but unconditionally loving in this condition, where she's fixated on whatever form of imitation love that she can get, that would be highly unlikely, actually impossible. Then you continue. She's very loving, but on the other hand has frantic fits of rage. Well, so those two are impossible. She's a very loving person who has frantic fits of rage. No. When there is something or someone that she doesn't like. When she's in public, people sense the insanity in her eyes and shy away from her, and she smells horribly. So remember, the world has not worked for this woman, and now she's just withdrawing from it. So no happiness in the world, so she's going to create her own. She doesn't care if she stinks. Why would she care? She's the only person in her world. And she's going to bring all these things from the outside into her home. Exercise equipment, papers, whatever. So she's creating her own planet. And when things get out of control in her planet, it's frightening and then irritating. So When anybody does something she doesn't like, she has fits of rage. She's essentially screaming, I have to have my world my way, and you are messing with it, so you are not to be tolerated. She's gotten little pleasure from the world, so she can at least minimize her pain, which is what she does with her fits. You continue, I do try to show unconditional love, but people say to me things like, who is that homeless woman? And my own car needs a complete interior cleaning after she leaves. So when somebody says, who is that woman? Remember, you now have a new perspective of her. She's empty, she's afraid, she's lonely, she's doing the very best she can to cope in her crazy world, which is just miserable. And so rather than being ashamed of her, when somebody says, who's that homeless woman? Oh, that's my aunt. And actually I spend quite a bit of time with her. What's there to be ashamed about? It's not you, it's her. Accept her and accept your relationship to her. Then you say, what do you do about things like your car? Well, your choice depends on how much you're willing to freely love her. But it has to be freely given. So if you're taking her places in your car and then resenting it, that's not helping either of you. She can sense it, and you certainly do. So you decide what you're going to do. Every week, for example, Donna and I are involved in an active service for an older lady. And we pick her up and take her places at least once, sometimes twice. And every time she gets in the car, Donna just hates the smell of smoke. It's not my favorite, but bothers her more than me. And every time this woman gets in the car, I smell like smoke. On rare occasions, she's asked me to change my clothes even. But I smell like smoke. The car smells like smoke. I mean, it's everywhere. How could it not be? Because she smokes, and she smokes all the time. And so it's in her breath, it's in her skin, which are just natural consequences of smoking. So I have to make a decision. As much as I dislike being around smoke, am I willing to do that to freely love her? Yes or no? Because if it's no, then I would say, no, I'm not willing to pick you up. That's what I would do. But I make the decision, I am willing to do this. It's a gift I freely offer to her to take her places, to visit in her home, and have the natural consequences of that. I'm going to smell like an ashtray, and I'm going to take that home. But she would never know that that bothers me. You make the decision you're going to give it freely, not begrudgingly. Now, does that mean you have to? No. You do not have to put that woman in your car and then have to clean it afterward. But if you decide you're going to spend time with your aunt and do things for her, that just goes along with it. That's who she is. You have to decide, am I willing to love my stinky, smelly aunt? Yes or no? If you are, shoot, you'll be happy. You'll love it. If you're not willing to, then you wouldn't want to go ahead and offer the gift anyway. You're going to be resentful. But if you're not willing to do it at all, then just say no. That's the limit of your ability to love at this point. That's okay. You just note it and learn from it. You continue. Love has not changed her need for professional help, but she refuses to see a doctor. She will not part with a single penny for that, yet she will pay cash for a new car every 2 years. We wonder if she's eating. She'll consume huge portions of food when she's invited to dine with the family, but otherwise appears to be starving. So I don't know what to do with her. Well, you can't make her eat, and frankly, it's none of your business. If she doesn't eat, then she very likely might get sick, so thin that she becomes ill. She might die. Listen, she might die, and that's her choice. So you might note that she's thin, but if you tell a woman who's a control freak and who goes into fits of rage when people say or do things she doesn't like, and then you say, Aunt Smelly, you need to eat more, how do you think that conversation's going to go? A, she'll hate it, and she isn't going to eat more, not for you. So this really applies to pretty much relationships with everybody, doesn't it? I mean, we take them like they are, or we don't have a relationship with them. Because anything in between, having a relationship with somebody and trying to change them, oh, wow, how do these go? Do we need another 1,000 examples in our life that it will never work? And yet, we keep trying to do it. So just love the lady. Smell and all. My struggle, this viewer says, is with the principle of being loving. In other words, I struggle with my selfishness, and I've slipped into victim land. And that's the essence of everything running through my mind. I understand what it means to be loving, and I can even visualize what that looks like in everyday practice. But I just don't do it, and most times I fight it. I'm also aware that this is probably the greatest obstacle to my own happiness. I'm feeling a deep guilt over receiving the love that other people give me. Today, for example, I had an opportunity to do just a small thing, to assist my wife with a simple task that would not have required much effort or time on my part, and, in my usual manner, I begrudgingly said, "Well, I suppose," and immediately I knew what I'd done. Fortunately, and as always a blessing, my wife did not let that get between us, and she still remained open to me. She just doesn't deserve that from me. So what do? It's always simple. You recognize what's happening. Recognize your selfishness. Note it. Just see it. You don't need to beat yourself up about it. Just go, wow, that's pretty selfish of me. And then, instead of waiting for people to make their demands on you, very few of us respond well to somebody coming and grabbing us by the throat and saying, "I want you to do this." Because almost invariably we were doing something else. And we then feel inconvenienced. So instead of waiting for people to make their demands, make conscious choices about how you could be a little bit more loving toward other people. Little steps, little things. Think about these other people, like about your wife. If you sit in the chair at any moment of any day, I'll bet you can think of something she'd like. Even if it were to just get up out of the chair and for, this would take you all of 60 seconds, go find her wherever she is, just tap her on the shoulder, and when she turns around, just hug her. Look her in the eyes. Kiss her. Tell her, "I really appreciate you." And then say, "That's all." And then go back to your selfish chair. Do whatever small, loving thing you choose to do without feeling pushed. Let me tell you, that feels so much better for you and for the person receiving it than love or attention or affection that's demanded. This is fun. And make these conscious choices, maybe once a day for a while. Keep a journal and say, so tomorrow instead of doing one loving thing, I'll do 2. So you tell her that you care about her, and then you go in and you change the toilet paper on the toilet paper roll. I mean, some major task like that, and to most guys it is a big thing. Women will clean the entire house from top to bottom. A guy will change the toilet paper once and say, just wanted to let you know I changed the toilet paper. They want an award. And I'm one of those guys. We want to be recognized. We want to snap a photo of us doing it, put it up on the website. That's fine. Just do a selfless act. 1, then maybe 2, and then you start to generalize it maybe to other people, but don't be in a big hurry. Because if we look at what we are, selfish, and then we look at what we want to be, or sometimes not even want to be, what we think we ought to be, which is, perfectly loving, that's just depressing. That's just discouraging. And so then what do? We don't do anything. We sit back and we just go, I can't do it, I'll never change. And so we don't. So, little steps. You mentioned that you feel guilty about love that you're given. It's a virtual certainty then that you don't feel worthy of being loved. And honey, everybody is. Everybody's worth being loved. I mean, think about it. When people say, I'm not worth loving, and then I say to them, oh really, tell me what there is about you that's not worth loving. The behaviors that they describe in every case are the result of their not having gotten enough love. Now, do you see how insane and circular this reasoning is? Well, let's see. So it goes like this. I'm not worth loving because I haven't been loved. Well, that's nuts. Because what you're really describing is the unloving capacity of other people. So you can't be unworthy because of what you haven't gotten. No. It all changes when we just say, I am worth loving. Everybody is. And if I'll let it in, those behaviors that I view as making me unworthy of being loved will gradually go away. Well, then that takes care of the unworthiness part, doesn't it? But there has to be a beginning step, and that is, I will reach out for it, I will accept it, I won't question it, I'm not going to feel guilty about it, and as we do that, we'll also begin to see that other people are worth being loved too. And then we'll find it easier to love them, and of course we'll have more love to give them. To be honest, you continue, I hope, I fear that if I take a step in the direction of thinking about somebody else, there won't be time for my own interests, which I hold on to so dearly. Well, yeah, if you have felt unworthy of being loved, it only makes sense that you would believe that the only person who could ever fill your needs would be who? You. And that's what makes us selfish. That's one of the things that makes us selfish. We're not worth other people loving, and so we take care of ourselves. And so you spend all your time with yourself and taking care of your own needs. And that, of course, isolates you even more. So the solution? Remember that you are worth loving. Everybody is. I mean, is there anybody who doesn't believe that a newborn baby is worth loving? Duh. So what happened between you being a newborn baby and being worth being loved to now? What happened was you didn't get loved enough and started behaving in unproductive ways. Not unworthy ways, unproductive ways. And you can change that as you begin to take that love in. There are so many family members, friends, and others in my life, so this unconditionally loving them all just seems overwhelming and, well, time-consuming. To give of my time and attention to my own wife and my children and all these other people just kind of overwhelms me. So again, no rush. Practice one thing a day with your wife, and then add a loving thing to a child, and then to 2 children, and, get good at doing 2 or 3 things a day. Start off with 1, though, before you start beating yourself up about, oh man, I just can't be perfectly loving. Well, welcome to the club. I can't either. This viewer says, I have a question regarding the change in my interaction with my husband. Since learning about real love, at times, wishing it was all the time, I have been able to be much more kind and loving when my husband is angry at me. He was upset with me the other night, and instead of getting upset in return, I chose to be calm about it and answer lovingly with what I could do in response to what he was upset about. Well, bless your heart. That's perfect. At least it sounds perfect. He proceeded to tell me that he couldn't believe how manipulative I had become over the last 5 years. Well, I really wasn't being manipulative. I just stuck to what I could do in that moment for him, and also let him know what I could do the next day. Well, see, that's wonderful. We don't ever have to do everything that somebody wants. And I get these kind of situations, not rarely, where people will come to me and say, I want 10 of whatever, 10 units of attention, or 10 units of effort, or whatever it is. Or time. And I say, I can give you 5. And people will say, well, I want 10. Well, then now you have a choice to make. So now you can take the 5 and be happy about it, or you can reject the 5 and make yourself miserable by insisting on the 10. So what would you like to do? but I'm not annoyed. I'm just describing their options. And some people then become furious. But I want 10, and if you really cared about me, no, you're not obligated to give anybody anything that they demand. So like you say, you offered what you could do that day, you offered what you could do the next day. Kind of went the extra mile. It seems that as soon as I don't fall into our old song and dance, he lets me know how manipulative I'm being. Is this because I'm simply not responding to his anger like he wants me to? It really bothers me that he sees my calmness as being manipulative, whereas I see it as a huge, loving improvement over how I often react. Sounds like I might have some expectations. P.S. My husband has also heard me listening to the archived video chats, and he's made comments when he's angry about me using that real love crap on him. Yikes. This is usually when I'm once again not getting into our old habits of arguing. So people use anger and they argue to get really very powerful forms of imitation love. When I'm angry and I'm arguing, I get a sense of approval when I'm then right. I get definitely a sense of power. I mean, if I'm arguing with you and angry at you, usually the primary motivation is the sense of power I get over you and power over the situation. And then, of course, safety. If he feels the least bit threatened and he can respond with anger, then he's going to definitely feel safer. And he's been doing this with you and with others for a very long time, very likely his entire life. And when you two first got together, you had to have complied with this. You agreed to this arrangement. So he said, I'm going to get angry and argue with you, and then you're going to back down, or you're going to argue with me for a while and then back down. Whatever it was, you two had a little recipe, and you actually said, okay, all right, I agree to that. Now, neither of you remembers having this conversation because you didn't have it in that way. But when he came at you angry and arguing, and you responded with either compliance or arguing and then withdrawing or whatever it was, and if you did that repeatedly without realizing it, you agreed to that recipe, to that particular exchange of imitation love. And your relationship then became founded on it. So now you're suddenly saying, we're going to change all the rules. And he's thinking, no, we're not. No, we're not. We're going to do it like you agreed to in the beginning. You have essentially broken a sacred contract in his eyes. Now, he doesn't realize that that's what he's saying and that that's how he feels. But he feels the effects of that. This is a violation, it's a betrayal. How dare you change the rules? Even if you're changing them for the better. Some relationships, in fact, where real love is introduced, the other partner just flies apart like glass and leaves because they can't take the change in the rules, even if their partner is being loving. Now, you need to be sure that when you're calm, you're also not condescending. So that, like when he's angry, you don't go, I'm not going to participate in this argument. If you say that, that is an accusation. It is. That's how he'll take it. Whereas if you simply now I'm not saying you did this, but if you simply calmly respond, well, I'd be glad to do this, and I offer this, and I offer that, and he becomes angry because you don't participate according to the old rules, that is now his problem. So it's a solution. You have to stay off the field of death. Just because somebody issues you a perfectly legitimate invitation to a fight doesn't mean you have to accept. So do not respond as you used to respond. Then you're just going to be right back where you were, which was miserable. And then go out of your way to be as loving to him as possible, to comply as much as you choose, which may not be the same as much as he wants. So be loving, be sweet, go out of your way to offer, for no reason at all, unconditionally loving acts toward him. Find him, touch him, love him, some of the things that we talked about earlier. But do not participate in this old way, or the old way will continue forever. Now, will he eventually get the point that this is better? We'll see. All you have to focus on now is learning to be more loving yourself, and you will be happier, you as an individual. And usually it has a positive loving effect on your partner as well. So these have been, wow, great questions. We've still got actually several left, but we'll get to those next week, and I really appreciate your sending your questions. Continue to do that. The questions you ask benefit me, and they benefit everybody else who's listening. So I look forward to talking to you again a week from tonight, and in the meantime, it's always about real love. Talk to you then.